Well, good evening. Glad that you're here with us on a Wednesday night. We are on the Harmony of the Gospels lesson 100. And so we've made it to the 100 mark. Yay. But I know it's been a couple of weeks since we've met. And it's going to be a couple more weeks. It'll be after the first of the year until we're back here again on a Wednesday night, except because next two Wednesday nights coming up, we're going to ask if some of you would help us to go to some of the homes and to have a small time with some of the shut-ins and some people. And then we come back for a Christmas Eve service here at the church. And then it'll be next Wednesday after that is no service. And then we come back. What is actually the first on? Is that on a Wednesday too? 31st is Wednesday. Okay, 31st is a Wednesday. Yeah, so it'll be a while. So the reason I said that is because today or tonight for the lesson 100, I usually do about anywhere from 12 to 15 verses. We're doing 42 or 41, 42 tonight. Okay, because this is one whole story, and there was no real good place to stop to say, okay, they'll remember this in 6 weeks. All right. So we're just going to do the whole thing tonight. It won't take long because it's a very familiar story. But let me get you caught up to where we are tonight. So remember, Jesus has been in the temple, and it's been the Feast of the Tabernacles. And while he's been there, he has been saying some things that has really ruffled the feathers of the Pharisees and all the religious people there. He talked about being the living water. He talked about coming unto him and that he was the one who had been sent after he read some verses. And people were being divided in the temple. Some said, why is he even preaching? He shouldn't be up there or teaching. Others said, this is the best teaching we've ever heard in our life. And then they brought this woman in, and they was trying to accuse her, and he stood up for her. And so if in the long run of all of this that's happening, Jesus has been doing his mission, and it has made these men so upset that Jesus said in front of the crowd there, they want to kill me. He was reading their heart. So after all of that spectacle, he leaves the temple, and as soon as he leaves the temple, this is the story that we have. And so let's start. It says, and Jesus passed by. He saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents? And he was born blind. Jesus answered, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh, no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So let's look at the purpose of suffering first, or the purpose in suffering. Number one, who is to blame when something is not in harmony as one suspects it ought to be? This is the theology that we're going to look at. Who is to blame? So, number one, as Jesus left the temple celebrating the Feast of the Tabernacles, he passed by a man who was identified as one who was born blind. Now, we're not sure how they known that. I know Jesus knows everything. I get that. But this man was born blind. We're not told how they know that, but they identified him as one who has been born blind. Maybe they had known him in the past, passing through the streets. I don't know. But he is identified as being born blind. Not being born and then losing his sight after birth. But he was born blind. Number two, the disciples were prompted to ask the question based on widespread theological assumption regarding those who suffered in life. There is this theological thought that we're going to look at in just a second, that people of that culture and day assigned to people that was born with issues. Number three, the assumption links to physical ailments, especially disabilities, directly to specific moral transgressions, implying a divine judgment. Okay? So because of this, something happened. Number 4, suffering was a result of divine punishment. Therefore, the question remains, did the man cause the blindness by sin, or was it his parents who caused the blindness by their sin, and did the son receive the consequences? Okay? So the theology is that when a child was born or a person was born and something was wrong with the child, there was a blame either placed on the child itself, which doesn't make sense, right? Or there was a blame placed on the parents that there was a transgressional sin somewhere, and this is the consequences of that sin. Now, I know to us that sounds a little bit absurd, but I want to tell you that that same theology that started there, and you got to remember, and I don't have time for this because we got 40-some verses to get through. But if you remember where the gospel was started and where it's at, it was in the northern Africa area. And you notice that when the churches started, when I was in Africa, the same theology several years ago was the same theology as then. We went to a church, and it was probably about this size, and every member in the church was deaf. Now, have you ever been any place where the whole room is filled up with deaf people? This is where they basically lived and thrived. Most of the people there were tossed out by the parents because they viewed them to be imperfect. And so that theology still reigns. When we were in Haiti, we met a trash can baby, a very deformed baby that the parents threw away. And so this theology is that the child is not perfect, that somebody sinned. And so this was the question that they were asking. So the question, if you think about it, was a legitimate question because that's what the culture thought. That's what theology was teaching back then. But Jesus, number 5, rejects the theology that has been passed on for years to reframe the suffering as neither the man nor the parents had sinned, but that he was born in the way so that God may have the glory. So he changes it. He rearranges the story. It's not their fault. The reason it happened is because it will gain the attention to bring glory unto God. But he didn't stop there, number 6. The purpose of the blind man was not only for the man to be blind, but that the works of God who sent Jesus would be accomplished while there is still day. Now, that's important because, number 1, to think about all of this just hurts my mind. Because you got to remember that from the very beginning, God knew that he was going to send his son. He knew his son would be born in a manger. He knew his son was going to grow up. And he knew that one day this son was going to pass by this blind man. I mean, this is all what God had planned for this to happen. And he said that he must be about this business during the day. Because number 7 says there's coming a day when darkness falls, and we've already seen the dark clouds rising in the form of the Pharisees looking to kill Jesus. But it goes beyond that. We're talking about darkness falling. In other words, that the God of this world is going to make this world darker and darker and darker. Until the time that, yes, the Holy Spirit will pull back, and then all sin will break loose, and there will be no conviction and so forth. But he said, while there is day, while I am the light, why I'm here, this is the reason I am here, is to do what the Father has done. Yet there is hope in number 8, that the light is still available for the people, and the Lord is not so interested in what the disciples are interested in. His mission is to do the work before the darkness sets in. So they're interested in, right? They're interested in who caused the sin for this man to be born blind. Jesus says, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in doing the Father's work. Because if I do the Father's work, he's going to be glorified. Number 9, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And although we know that he is not physically here, and I'm talking about right now, he sent the Holy Spirit so that we become the children of light, sent into the world to work the works of Christ. And so, yes, Jesus is the light, and his light is still shining, but that light shines because the Holy Spirit came to illuminate the light of Christ for us to know him, that we would become the children of light, so that we get to illuminate the light of God as well. So this is the first part. Next we go, when he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground, made clay a spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said unto him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is the interpretation sent. He went on his way therefore and washed and came seeing. B, Jesus shows the disciples, the blind man, and all who would testify that he was working in the light. In other words, Jesus is doing something as the light of the world. He's working in the daytime to perform this miracle. Now, two things should catch our attention, starting with the spit and the dust upon the ground. It is assumed that Jesus spat upon the dust, formed it after he spit on it, and made this little muddy clay type solution to put up on the man's eyes. Now, how we can relate that is this. By using the dust of the ground, we are reminded of what took place in Genesis 2:7. And the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground. So we can see that in the original creation, how man was made, the Lord takes that same dust and spits on it, and he rubs it, or he places it on the guy's eyes, and we find that to take place. Now, we'll get more into this in a minute, but Jesus took that time to work that moment. He didn't tell the man to come back. He didn't say, I'll see you later. He said, here's what I'm going to do right now. And that is important. He spat up on the ground, took that dust, kneaded it into clay, and then applied it to the man. The second thing that we note is that Jesus sent the man to the pool of Siloam to wash off the clay, and when he did so, he could see. For the very first time, he could actually see what was in front of him. Now, number 5 says, we could say that this was the first step in the discipleship of this man. In other words, this is a disciple, right? A disciple is a follower of Christ. And so one of the first steps that he shows us as a disciple, and more to be a disciple in the coming verses, is that he was willing to listen, obey, and trust the Lord in some very weird circumstances. Now, I understand the man was blind. But even if you're blind, if somebody said, okay, I want to help you, and you're blind, and you got your sense of hearing, and you hear them, spit into the ground, doing this, you're probably thinking, this is kind of weird, right? So it's some weird circumstances, but as weird as it might be, he's willing to listen and obey and trust. Number 6. Also notice that John says that the name of the pool is interpreted sent, which means that the one, capital O-N-E, who sent him, which points to Jesus, was also sent unto the world to seek the lost, which included doing miracles, something the pool could not do. So when he went to the pool to wash off, let me just tell you, that water had no healing in it possible. The water could not heal. If that was the case, everybody would have gone to the pool, right? It was because he trusted and listened and obeyed that he went to the pool that he was healed. The next one is this. The neighbors, therefore, and they which before had seen him, that he was blind, said, is not this he that sat and begged? Some said, this is he. Others said, he is like him. But he said, I am he. Therefore they said unto him, how were thy eyes open? And he answered, a man that is called Jesus, made clay, anointed my eyes, and said unto me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received my sight. Then they said unto him, where is he? And he said, I know not. So let's look at some reactions. Let's start with the neighbors. The neighbors could not believe, get this, what they were seeing. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Number one, just as the disciples asked why this man was blind, the neighbors will ask, how can this man see? They saw him as a beggar. He saw them for the very first time. With the identity being in question because of the confusion, some said it was him, some said it looks like him, he speaks for himself to identify as the one who was once blind. He said, yeah, that's me. I'm him. I was the blind man. And of course, they are inquiring minds want to know, how is it possible? How do you have the ability to have sight now? We've known you all these years and you didn't have sight, but now you do. Number 4, listen to his accurate account of how he gained his sight. He said, a man called Jesus made clay. That's a better way to phrase it than said, a man named Jesus spit in dust, right? He said he made clay, anointed my eyes, and said unto me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received my sight. And what the man said was an accurate testimony of what happened because of such a transformation that they had witnessed. They had to question who he was, but then they had to question, well, where is he? It's almost like they don't believe him. So where is this guy called Jesus? Where is the one who told you to go to the pool? Where is the one who put clay in your eyes and anointed your eyes? Where is he? We would like to see him. And he says, well, I don't know. And so we find that because of what's going on, that the next part of the story is that they brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then again, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put clay upon my eyes, and I washed and do see. Therefore, some said of the Pharisees, this man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, how can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. And they say unto the blind man again, why sayest thou of him, and that he'd opened thy eyes? And he said, he's a prophet. So let's look at the reaction of the Pharisees. You know, whenever the Pharisees are involved, there's going to be issues. You might as well count on that. I don't know if we could ever go to Scripture to really find that there's not going to be an issue with the Pharisees when they're part of the story. Number one, do not pass over the timing, which is the problem for the Pharisees. The miracle happened on the Sabbath. Here we go again. Jesus always seems to do a miracle on the Sabbath. And when he does that, it causes them to go into a tizzy fit. They do not like it because their Sabbath laws, they are not to be doing certain things. And Jesus always seems to be interrupting these laws. Now, if he was a true Jew, and if he really knew God, he would keep these laws. He wouldn't break them. We've seen it over and over and over. Number 2, so why is this problematic? Why happen on this? Well, Jesus violated one of the Sabbath laws of kneading that dust into clay and healing a man. One of the laws on the Sabbath was that no one shall knead on this day. Most of them didn't make bread or anything else. You didn't do anything. Because he was kneading that dust into clay, he was breaking the Sabbath. Number 3, when the man is questioned again, his answers cause a division among the religious men. So he's going to answer them one more time. He's trying to give them the proper answer. Number 1 there. Some thought he was a sinner for breaking the Sabbath. I mean, that's just the way they're landing. He's going to be a sinner. He's always a sinner because of what he does on the Sabbath. He has no loyalty to the law whatsoever. Number two, some thought a sinner could not perform such a miracle as this. So there is some that are doubting that if he was a sinner, how did he do this? Because no sinner could do such a miracle as this. And so there is this possibility of some Pharisees beginning to question, do we really have him pegged right? Is there something we're missing? Number four, again, the question is about the man's healing of his sight. And the man takes a step further, calling Jesus a prophet. So we know that he calls him Jesus, but now he calls him a prophet because he's done something that, that has been miraculous. That there's something special about him. Number five, the religious crowd would never go as far to say that Jesus was a prophet. If anything, they have labeled him as a false prophet. That's why they want to get rid of him, because they believe he's a false prophet, but yet he's doing things that they're not able to do, and he's saying things that they've not been able to say, and he's calling people to follow him, and people are following him, and so they're just going to label him as a false prophet or a false teacher. So then we go from the reaction of the parents, the Pharisees. Now look next, we see, but the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they had called the parents of him that had received his sight. And they asked him, saying, is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then doth he now see? His parents answered them and said, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now seeth, we know not. Or who hath opened his eyes, we know not. He is of age, ask him. He shall speak for himself. These words spake his parents because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Therefore said his parents, he is of age, ask him. So again, we come back to the reaction of the parents. This time the parents are called to give a testimony of their son and his blindness. I'm sorry, the first time was the neighbors. So the neighbors, the Pharisees, now the parents. So now the parents are brought to the forefront. Number one, because of the unbelief. Now, this time, remember, it said the Jews. It didn't really say the Pharisees. It said the Jews. The Jews, in probability here, meaning the Sanhedrin. There's probably some Pharisees mixed into this, but it's more still of a Jewish religious crowd. It's not the guys that are next to him that will believe the miracle. It's somebody, the Jews, meaning that there's somebody who is still strict about being a Jew. And so when we look at this, we'll see that because of the unbelief, the Jews or the Sanhedrin wanted the parents to say something to incriminate their son, to prove that he was lying about what he had taken place. In other words, they're wanting them to incriminate him by saying, well, no, that wasn't Jesus. He just woke up one day and he could see. No, that wasn't Jesus who healed him. The reason he could see now is because he was blind and he tripped over a rock and hit his head on a boulder, and now he can see. You know, they're trying to get the parents to give some explanation of how this happened. So when asked if it was their son, they acknowledged that it was and that he was born blind, but how and who was part of him being able to see, they said, we can't answer that. It's not that they can't, it's just they won't. See, number three, the religious Jews were good for producing fear and intimidation. As we've seen earlier with the woman who was called in adultery. And you'll know that when it says there that it already said that anybody who confesses Jesus as Christ, they would already be cast out of the synagogue. And so they're intimidating, placing fear upon the parents, hoping that they will do something. So number four, the parents try to push the weight back up on the Jews by saying that the man was old enough to speak for himself, and ask him what happened. So they want to intimidate him out of fear. Hey, you know what we said. Y'all confess Christ, you're out of the temple, so you better tell us the truth. Well, they back away and they put the weight back onto them. Listen, our son is old enough to speak for himself. If you want to know, you ask him. So their silence speaks to the volume, though, in number 5, of the social fear they were feeling as if they would be potentially put out of the temple, not wanting to agree that Jesus is a prophet, or greater yet, the Messiah. So socially, they do, I guess you would say, socially they didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to be cast out of the temple. And number 6, I think this is important. Let's be fair and accurate here. The son was more willing to confess Jesus and be humiliated socially. In other words, he would rather confess that Jesus is the one who healed him and that his name is Jesus, and that he is a prophet up until this time that he talks about labeling him as that. He would rather be humiliated socially by other people and not be the ones who would socially bow down to be a part of something else. You see, the parents denied the voice to claim Jesus as the healer of their own son. So, they're going to take the parents' advice. So it says, then again, they called the man that was blind and said to him, "Give God praise. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered and said, "Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see." They said to him again, What did he to thee? How opened thy eyes? He answered them, and he says, "I've told you already, and you did not hear. Wherefore would you hear it again? Will you also be one of his disciples?" Then they reviled him and said, "Thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciple. We know that God spoke unto Moses. As for this fellow, we not know whence he is." The man answered and said to them, Why herein is a marvelous thing, that you know not what hence he is, and that yet he opened my eyes. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if a man be a worshiper of God and doeth his will, him heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered and said to him, "Thou wast altogether born in sin," or sins, "and does not teach us, and does thou teach us?" And they cast him out. So let's look at the reaction now between belief and unbelief. The man is called back for questioning by the Jews/Pharisees with the intent to discredit him and Jesus. I mean, this is the whole thing. Not once have we heard in this story of any of the Pharisees say, "Man, this has been a wonderful thing. This guy was blind at birth and now he can see. Man, that's a blessing." Not once, because they're not concerned. They don't care about the miracle. They don't care about the guy. All they care about is discrediting who Jesus is. Number one, the tension in the air is growing. They want the man to give God the glory and call Jesus a sinner. Now, when they say, "We want you to call upon God and give him the glory," what they want to do is they want him to testify that God is God and that he is standing on God's name and that he will stand with God in the Jewish religion, right, and the laws and rituals, and call Jesus a sinner because they see him on the outside of this. Now, notice that what the man does begin to say, he said, he says this, he says, they said, the Jews and the Pharisees, Sadducees, and all the Sanhedrin or whatever, they say, "We know Jesus is a sinner." Why? Why do they know Jesus is a sinner? Well, only because he has broken the Sabbath. He's been outspoken in the temple. And the list continues. Number two, the man did not know if Jesus was a sinner. He says, "You call him a sinner. I don't know if he's a sinner." But he says this. But what he did know, this is the man, what he does know was that he was blind and now he can see. That is a testimony. And what he knows is objective facts. In other words, he's doing this. I can't tell you if he's a sinner, but here's what I can tell you. I know that he has come before me and that he spit upon some dust, made it a clay, packed my eyes, told me to go to the pool to wash my eyes out. I did. I can see. This is all objective facts. No one could dispute it. And what we see is for the religious crowd was subjective. It was their opinion that Jesus was a sinner. It was their opinion that Jesus needed to be discredited. And so we're looking at this in two different ways. Number 3, they continue to pressure him to tell him how this happened. And he says, you know what? I've already told you. Because they want him to keep telling his story. And if you've ever been, watching these law shows, or if you listen to crime podcasts like I do, they want these people to keep telling their story over and over and over, because they keep telling the story over and over. Eventually they're going to mess up and give another detail, or they're going to lie here or lie there. And that's what they want him to do. They just want to keep telling his story. And eventually he's going to mess up, and they're going to say, okay, we got you. And he says this, I tell you what. Number 4. Notice the man did not tell his story. But he did ask, he says, listen, I will retell it if, here you go, if you would like to be one of his disciples. If you want to be one of his disciples, I'll tell you the story again, and you can become one of his disciples. He's willing to do that, because he already knows, he's already told the story and they're not listening. But if you want me to tell it and you become his disciple, I'll be happy to do that. Number 5, of course, this upsets the Jews and the Pharisees, who hit back him to say, we are Moses' disciples, referring to their Jewish estate. And we've already talked about this. This is what they're leaning on, right? This is their whole heritage that they lean on. Number 6, we know that it is God that spoke to Moses. But they speculate loudly that God did not talk to him or Jesus, because they had no idea who he was or his background per se. In other words, with Moses, they have writings. They know that because of the prophets before them, their forefathers had told the story, and that God had talked to Moses. But they have no recollection, no writings, no nothing. They have no idea that right before them is God in the flesh. Number 7, listen to the man as he steps into their shoes as a religious man with a religious background. I say that because he's going to use their theology on them. I love this. This man who was blind, who becomes seeing, he's going to use religious theology to throw back at the religious men. Number 1, I would love to know his tone of voice in this. Isn't this marvelous that you have no idea who he is, but he's opened up my eyes? I don't know if he said it that way, but I wonder if it was like a smart aleck remark. How marvelous is this? You don't even know him, but look what he's done for me. Number 2, God does not listen or empower sinners. That's what you tell us. That's what you say. But only those who worship him and do his will. You've preached this to us. You've talked about this. You know this. Number 3, this miracle is unprecedented. Since the world began, no one has ever opened the eyes of a person born blind. Oh, so you know that's never happened. And number 4, if this man were not of God, he could do nothing. So number 8, therefore the man is speaking on the fact that since all of this is to be true, he says this man is from God. He fills all the check blanks or all the check boxes in order to be Messiah, and you just missed it. Notice, this is the same way it happens today. I don't care what social platform you're on. I don't care what television newscast you watch. I don't care. Here's the reply. Notice how they respond. Look at you. You have no right to teach us because you were born of sin. Notice they never argued back with facts. They just said, you know what? You're a disgusting human being because you were born in sin, and you want to teach us something? I don't think so. The response of the Jews showed that they were dismayed at the man's testimony, the importance of the miracle and the claims and of the one who performed it. They were individuals who rejected the light, favoring darkness because their actions were evil. To show you the disdain with all that had happened and their lack of disbelief, they cast him out of the temple. So, we're not even going to argue with you. You think that you're a smart aleck by giving us back our own religious thing? I'll tell you, we'll show you. You were born in sin and you get out of here. Don't ever come back. That was their response. Notice what happened. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, Dost thou believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he? And Lord, that I might believe on him. And Jesus said unto him, Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Let's talk about true sight. After the man is kicked out, Jesus, like a shepherd, searches for the man as if he were one of the sheep. Right? That's the kind of way we could see that. Jesus asked the man a simple question that every person, I believe, should be able to ask. Should be asked. Everybody in the world should be asked this. Do you believe in the Son of God? It's a good question. Notice Jesus did not ask him anything about the miracle, but about the miracle maker, the Messiah. The miracle has already been vilified. The miracle's already been done. He's not talking about the miracle. He wants to know, do you believe in the Son of God? Number 3, the man heard of the Son of God, but he wanted to know to whom the Son of God would be revealed so that he could believe. It's obvious that he's probably heard because he was already in the temple. His parents were in the temple, that there was going to come one who would be the Son of God, that he would be the Messiah. The Jews were looking for the Messiah to come. He's probably heard that, and he said, well, who is he? So that I might know him. Number 4, Jesus delivers the ultimate personal revelation. You have seen him, and as he was speaking to you, you've seen him. In blindness, number 5, in blindness, he did not see the Lord at first. With new eyesight, he still did not fully recognize Jesus. Now his physical sight gives way to spiritual sight. Number 6, the confession of the man is spoken like many of us. Lord, I believe. True belief leads to worship. Now, I wrote this question here, and I'd love to explore it, but I know some people think that it's judging, but I think it's still a good question. Does it make you question you or someone else's belief? Because the Bible said that when he believed, he worshiped him. There's a lot of people who say they believe, but they'll never come to the house of worship, or they'll never worship the Lord. Believing leads to worshiping. Okay? Now, last. Jesus said, For judgment I have come into the world, that which not might see, that they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words and said to him, Are we blind also? Jesus said to them, If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now ye say, We see, therefore your sin remaineth. So the last one, to see or not to see. Jesus turns what seems natural, seeing versus blindness, into opposites of what we think. Jesus had come to bring salvation to the Jews, but many Jews and religious leaders chose not to allow the light to shine in their lives. Number 2, Jesus came to open the eyes spiritually to those who were blind in this world to see their need, and those who believe they can see are blind. In other words, like the Pharisees, they were religious and missed. Number 3, the Pharisees were around watching Jesus interact with the man, were close enough to hear what Jesus said, prompting them to ask if they were also blind. Now, I can't tell you, this might be the Pharisees that maybe said, he might be a sinner, but he's doing these miracles. There's something about this guy. Maybe it's that crowd. Maybe it's the other crowd. They're just going to follow him and see if they can find anything else against him. Or maybe it was a mixture of both. But there was some Pharisees that heard Jesus say what he said. And number 4, the sin of the Pharisees is defined not by ritual failure or ignorance, but by a willful rejection and spiritual arrogance in accepting Jesus. It all boiled down, they just chose not to. Number 5, spiritually. Number 1, the blind man gained his sight. In verse 11, he refers to the name Jesus. So we see how this works. He calls him Jesus. In verse 17, he is a prophet. In verse 33, he is the man from God to whom I believe and worship. So you can see how he is developing in his thought process, right? From a name to a prophet to a man to one he will believe and worship. Number 2, the Jews/Pharisees were physically seeing but spiritually blind and remained that way. Like a lot of people, they are looking for a miracle rather than the miracle maker and miss out on being spiritual enlightened only to remain in darkness. This whole story is not about a man being able to see. It's about the spiritual light that came for the man to find Christ and the Pharisees to remain in darkness. And so that is the thrust of what had happened. So it took a little longer, but we got there. So that cleared out the entire chapter for us. And so for those who are watching, we will see you Sunday, and hope that you have a good rest of the week.